So one of the important things that pertains to the Korean community, I think, is there's a lot of information about kimchi. I've had many of my friends, parents, relatives, come up and talk to me about this and say, is kimchi bad for you? Is it killing me? What's the story? I hear it's good. I hear it's a superpower food. I hear it's going to cause cancer. Well, there are a lot of different debates on this. And many people say that they feel fine eating it. It's part of everyday routine. It's part of our everyday diet. Other people say, as soon as I eat anything like kimchi, it just burns my stomach, it hurts. So I think a lot of this is also related to what you do and how much you eat. And when it comes down to it, one can look at many different things as toxins or poisons, but little bits are not very harmful. Too much can always be very harmful. So the current sides are that these fermented kinds of foods that have been sitting, fermenting a lot, heavy spices, can cause a lot of damage to the stomach lining. And repeated exposure, eating it every day, large amounts, can cause a lot of irritation. And some scientists have proven that. They've said eating too much of this is possible to be causing stomach cancer. Other people say that these kinds of fermented foods have good bacteria in it and keep your body in good balance. So there are two very opposite sides to this. And I think the way that we should approach this is moderation. A little bit is always good. Too much of anything is dangerous. Even water. Drinking a little bit of water every single day is very good, but too much water can even make your body sick. So I think that's a reasonable approach to have to this kind of situation. It makes me hungry. So one of the important aspects of the stomach is this bacteria called H. pylori. H. pylori was discovered maybe about 15 years ago, and I remember hearing about this in medical school at the very start. And somebody came in and said they've just discovered a bacteria that might be responsible for ulcers, and they're going to start treating ulcers more with antibiotics instead of antacids. And about 15 years later, the gentleman who discovered H. pylori won the Nobel Prize in Science. This is one of the most important discoveries in science. And they also found that Helicobacter pylori, or H. pylori, has also been listed as a carcinogen. It is listed as a cancer-causing agent. So how do we get this? A lot of people still don't know. They think it might be in the food. They think it might be in the air. One area that people do seem to think that it exists very strongly is in water. And most people seem to get infected actually in childhood. They found that families who have H. pylori tend to have children who have H. pylori. And when you look at the rates of people who have H. pylori and families who have H. pylori all throughout the world, it's only about 10% in children. But in the Korean and Japanese population, it could be as high as 50%. Half the population in children can be positive for this bacteria. So with stomach cancer, it's the leading cancer type in Korea right now. So I think it's very important and pertinent to the Korean population to know that. And I think that many people seem to know this already. And I think in terms of talking to people, there are many people here who I think have relatives or 2 or 3 people removed that they know who have had stomach cancer. So this is a very important aspect of family history. Here in America, as I've seen, only 2% of the new cancers in America are stomach cancer. But in Korea, it's 20%, and also the most virulent. It's very, very strong. When it's found here in the United States, it seems to be in much greater advanced states. But in Korea and Japan, because I think people are smart enough to start screening early and they're sensitive to it, Many stomach cancers can be found, but they're found much earlier, and people do very well with minor surgery. So really, early screening seems to be the difference. So how can one person stay healthy? Just in terms of the overall digestive tract. There are certain simple rules to follow. With the stomach, eat less and eat earlier. It usually takes about 3 or 4 hours for the stomach to empty out after a meal. So we usually tell people, try not to lie down within 3 or 4 hours of eating. Otherwise, all night long while you're sleeping, your food sits in your stomach, and then you wake up and you don't feel very good. So ulcers. Aspirin and pain relievers can cause a lot of stomach irritation, and it's often one of the main reasons why people come into the hospital for bleeding. So try to minimize aspirin and Advil, Motrin use. Food allergies and intolerance. Always be observant and look and see what foods bother you and what foods don't. Sometimes it could be timing, sometimes it could be the type of food. And if you do seem to have a lot of problems with food, it helps to write a diary down. One day, write down the foods that you're eating, and if certain days feel uncomfortable, just look back and say, all right, I ate this and I ate this. Maybe these are the foods that I don't sit well with. Regarding H. pylori infection, there are several different ways to get checked. One, you can have a breath test checked. Just walk into the office, you could take a breath test and blow into a bag and find out whether the bacteria is there. What we try to do is if people have stomach pain, if there's heartburn, if there's indigestion, I think that's reason enough for a person of Korean heritage to come in and have an endoscopy done and get checked for H. pylori and early signs of stomach cancer. What we do is sedate people. It takes about 3.5 to 4 minutes. We take a thin, flexible telescope, look down into the stomach while you're sleeping, and then basically take some biopsies and come right out. So it's a very simple test, and it could be very, very helpful in improving your overall health. And lastly, colon cancer screening. If you're 50 and above, then this is a test that's very, very helpful in determining whether there are any growths in the intestines. And the best part about this test is that, one, you're sleeping, and two, if we find something, we could take it out right then and there. So it's a life-saving test, and it takes about 15 minutes. We say once every 5 to 10 years. So I think that's pretty much it. Thanks very much.